Tuesday Night Touchdown Podcast with your hosts, Reese Downing and Jacob Workman.
What's up, everyone? We're back. First episode of the year, the ACC Conference Preview. Reese, last time we were here was the NFL Draft. It's been a little while. How's everything been going?
Good, man. Ready for football to get going here. We've got a pretty good docket of shows coming up here over the course of the next, 2 months. Leading up to kickoff. I think we've got one additional episode maybe that we're going to do for the NFL since that starts a little bit late. But yeah, we've got plenty of content coming for you guys here over the course of the next couple months leading up to the season. So I'm ready to get rolling.
Yeah, week 0, Saturday, August 24th. So roughly, 7 weeks out, 8 weeks out, something like that. So yep. It will be here before we know it. And thankfully, in week 0, Florida State is playing, so I don't have to wait too long to see my team play, which is always nice. Since we are in the ACC Conference Preview, we'll go ahead and recap last year. So Florida State did win the ACC last year, defeating Louisville in the conference championship game, and then proceeding to not get put into the Invitational, as we've all discussed heavily last year. Hopefully, with the changes into the system this year, stuff like that will never happen again. But we'll see. It's the NCAA. They're good at messing everything up. So we'll see what happens in the end. Reese, just as we get started here, any preseason ACC thoughts before we start here?
I think this is going to be one of the more entertaining conferences in the country, especially with all these QB transfers incoming between obviously DJU and Cam Ward and Grayson McCall, Kyle McCord, all these guys coming in. It's going to be interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of really good offensive teams in this year. And I'm also excited about this being the first season where there is no division. So the best 2 teams in the ACC are going to meet in the title game. So should be a good conference year for them.
Yeah, so potential of a Florida State Clemson conference championship game. Be the first time for that ever. Also, we have the addition of the horse team SMU, Stanford, and Cal. So the Atlantic Coast Conference is now on the West Coast, and Texas. So it's a little interesting change there. All right, so we're going to get started with some preseason conference championship odds and win totals. Florida State is coming in as the preseason favorite at a plus 270 to win the conference, followed by Clemson, Miami, Louisville, NC State. That's the top 5 to round it out. So Reese, if we look at this, what are some things that stand out to you just up front?
Yeah, so I mean, starting at the top here, the Noles at over 5.5. I think that sticks out as a relatively safe bet. They're bringing back only 8 starters, but they killed it in the transfer portal on both sides of the ball. This is definitely one of the more well-rounded teams in the ACC, and I honestly don't know that it's that close. A little surprised that Clemson is ranked above Miami. Clemson 138 on the over, I think here makes sense. The program's gone 30-10 since 2021. Dabo sat on his hands during the entire transfer portal, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. They are bringing back some solid players on the offensive side of the ball, but only 2 starters are returning on defense, and they didn't have any momentum to grab any big-name players in the portal, which kind of throws up a red flag. Miami on the over here, I also feel like is a safe bet. Looking at their schedule, I see 2 potential losses, and we can talk about that more here in a bit.
Miami on the over is never a safe bet. Let's put it that way. That's especially the way they've been the last few years. I mean, just last year they could have kneeled a game and won, and Georgia Tech got a turnover and beat them at the end. That's Miami football. So if you're just looking at this, what would you say right now is your favorite bet for conference championship?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit before we got on the show. I'm going to go a little middle of the pack here and pick Virginia Tech as a bit of a sleeper pick. They've got the 4th easiest schedule in the ACC this year, and when you consider conference and non-conference, they're looking pretty good. So for conference championship pick here, I would like the bet here for Virginia Tech.
So plus 1,200 on Vatech would be your conference championship bet you would like?
I think so, yeah.
That's good. That's good odds preseason. Well, we're going to go ahead and get into this just because they actually are my favorite win total bet. So Well, before we get into that, let's actually just go ahead and get yours. What is your favorite win total bet also?
Yeah, so I've got two here because I just couldn't pick between the two. I've got Vatek in the over, and I also have Miami in the over, which I know you were picking on that just a second ago. Let's start off looking at holistically at Miami's schedule. I've got them getting wins on the road against Florida, home against A&M. Clearly, the mighty Ball State Cardinals are going to pummel them at home. Kidding.
That is Flam, Florida A&M, not Texas A&M for the people listening.
Yeah, Flam. Yeah, there you go. On the road at South Florida, on the road at Cal, home against Duke, on the road at Georgia Tech, home against Wake Forest. I have those all as wins. On the road against Syracuse, although if I had to put a potential asterisk on any of the games here, it'd be this one. Syracuse seems to be getting a little bit of a boost with McCord coming in, Brown at the head coaching spot. The two games I think are likely to be losses are on the road at Louisville, October 19th, and then at home against Florida State the following week on the 26th. Louisville's a really tough program, bringing back a lot of talent. Brom's got that team humming. Even if Miami escapes Louisville with a W, having the Noles the next week is rough, and I don't see them being able to win both of those games back to back. The only other potential sleeper loss I see on the schedule here is at home against Virginia Tech, which is my other favorite bet for win total. I think the Hokies are going to surprise some folks this year. They went from 3-8 in year one under Brent Pry to 7-6 last year. Finished pretty hot. They won 5 of their last 7 after Dones became the starter, returning 11 starters on offense, 8 on defense, including a couple transfer guys that can help improve that 24 per game that the defense was giving up last year. So I could run through all the wins here. The question marks really for me on their schedule are on the road at Miami, September 27th, on the road at Syracuse, November 2nd. And I think they can win that game, but it is a question mark. And then home against Clemson on November 9th. So that has them sitting at 9 to 10 wins. So if I had to pick the over on any of those, I'd be looking at Miami and Vatek.
All right. So just to streamline this a little bit, I'm going to run through Miami with you, and I'll give mine, you give yours. That way we can just get a game by game breakdown as we go week by week. So they're obviously, and to what you said about the game when they play Vatek, they're very lucky that game is not at Vatek because that is a Friday night game. And you know what I always say about the weeknight conference games on the road. Those are as dangerous as games as they can possibly be, even if you're the number one team in the nation playing an unranked team. Like those games are never safe.
Yeah, and that stadium's going to be rocking.
In Vatek, yes.
Miami. That's what I'm saying. If it were in Vatek, it would definitely be, it would be a loud environment for sure.
It would be insane. So Miami kicking off the season Saturday, August 31st at the Swamp at Florida. It's a 3:30 kick. So this game's going to be 8,000 degrees, the first game of the year. So you have to hope everyone is already prepared to go for hydration issues and cramping issues. It's going to be nuts in that game. Probably going to have rain just because it's 3:30 in Florida in August. I mean, that's just a given. It's going to happen. So this is one of my 50-50 games right off the bat. Obviously, we've got Cam Ward coming into his very first start for Miami on the road in Florida. This one's actually hard for me to pick. I don't know who wins this game. I'll leave it as a toss-up. I guess for the sake of this bet, we'll give Miami a win. So we're trying to get to 10 wins would be the over for Miami. So we're trying to get to 10. So they can only officially lose 2 games. So for the sake of this, let's give them a win there. They play Flam, Florida A&M the next week at home. That should be an obvious win. Stay home the following week for Ball State. That should be an obvious win, which I'm pretty sure you had them at 3-0 at that point also, right?
Unfortunately for Ball State, yes.
So this one is tricky to me. Saturday, September 21st, they're going on the road to USF in Tampa. USF is not a bad team at all. This is a surprising game that I'm actually going to throw up as a 50-50 game also, especially when it's going into a short week playing Vatek on Friday. Those are dangerous situations. For the sake of this again, I'll say win at USF. Do you have win there?
Yep, I do. So we're at 4-0.
So this is where we're going to change. I have them losing the next 4 games. I think they go on the road to Cal. That time hasn't been announced yet. That could potentially be a very late start at Cal. Cal's defense is no joke. Coach Justin Wilcox, I love what Cal does every year. They're not a bad team. And this is kind of, Miami, one of the premier teams of the ACC, traveling to Cal in their first year in the ACC. I think this is a big game. I think you had this as a win for Miami, correct?
I do have it as a win for Miami, but I can definitely see Cal making this a game, especially if they keep the ball out of Cam Ward's hands. And they've got a pretty decent run game, if I'm not mistaken. So between that and the defense, this could be a tough one.
Right. And Cal, obviously, with Cam Ward and Martinez both coming from the Pac-12 last year, Cal has experience playing against those guys, so they know them pretty well. They're going to hit a bye week the next week. Then they're going on the road to Louisville. Again, I think it's winnable for Miami, but this is a tough game. And on the road again, Miami has not proven anything to me yet that they're going to be enough to go on the road and win games. So that's where I put them at a loss here.
Okay,
what did you have here?
I have them as a loss there at on the road against Louisville. So that's the first loss.
So that is your first loss. Okay.
Yep.
So the following week, we've got the rivalry game. It is at Doak South. It's in Miami. Florida State, Saturday, August 26th. No time's been announced for that one. Obviously, if both teams are performing as expected, you'd probably assume this is a 7:30 or 8 o'clock night game. I think we are way better than them this year. So I'm obviously taking Florida State here, which would be their fourth straight loss at this point. What did you have here?
I do have them taking a loss here, and I think regardless of how that Louisville game comes out, as I said, coming out of that Louisville game and then having to face Florida State right after that, even though they're coming back home, is going to be rough. I do have Florida State winning that game, so that is their second loss on my schedule.
Okay. And so I can see where you're going over here because so at 2 losses there, they wouldn't be able to lose anymore. Obviously, they've got Duke at home. Duke isn't going to be a decent team again. I don't think they're bad by any means, but they did lose a lot. Brand new head coach coming in.
Yeah.
At Georgia Tech is next again, a kind of team on the rise, but not, I don't think. Well, I mean, Georgia Tech beat them last year, to be honest. That was the game I was talking about earlier where they didn't kneel out the game. And it is on the road, so I guess you never know. But I think I would give them a win here. Again, Wake should be a win. And like you mentioned, this might be a tricky game, their last game of the year, November 30th at Syracuse. That's a long road trip, late November. I mean, it's inside, so you don't have to worry about weather. But Fran Brown brought in a decent recruiting class. You never know. I mean, by the end of the year, they're going to be ready to go. And Miami with losses, if they're potentially out of the conference championship at this point, I mean, what are they playing for? So,
right.
And I think that's how you ran it down, right? You got them at 10-2 by just losing to Louisville and Florida State.
That's correct.
So I had them at 8-4 by going through this schedule, but I think Miami's win total, I think we're going to know a whole lot week 1. If they lose that Florida game, I think the under's a lock. I don't think there's a possible way that they can save it. I mean,
yeah, I'd agree with that.
They just have too much after that. So honestly, if I'm making the bet for Miami, it's minus 170 for a reason, but it's I like the under at minus 170 on Miami. So the other team we were talking about, we're going to run to Vatek real quick just so we can run through them because they were both of ours favorite win total pick. The over coming in, it's 8.5, so they just have to win 9 games, and that is a plus 142, which is good odds. So let's run through this. They got at Vandy, home against Marshall, at Old Dominion. Are we both going 3-0 there?
Yes.
Rutgers will be coming in to Blacksburg the next week. I have them winning that to go to 4-0.
Yep.
All right. At Miami, we literally just talked about. I've got them at 5-0 in that one.
That is what I have down as their first loss.
All right. So I got 5-0. You got 4-1. Then they're taking the long trek all the way across the country to play Stanford. Stanford, to me, might be the worst team in college football. They're horrendous. This should not be even close. So that's going to put me at 6-0. Yeah, 6-0, and you at 5-1, right?
Correct.
All right. Bye week coming in there. Go home to BC. I've got to win there, and Georgia Tech. So that's 2 more wins.
Yep.
At Syracuse, I've got to win there.
I do have a win there, but that is a question mark game for me just because of what we just talked about with Syracuse potentially, performing above what expectations are. But I do have that as a win.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then Clemson's actually going into Lane Stadium. That's going to be a game. That's a big one. Yeah. And I think even potentially, this might be crazy to say, but we might be talking, at least in my prediction, at an 11-1 Vatek team. Because if they can, even if they lose to Clemson, I don't have them at a loss yet. So if they lose to Clemson, I think they can go beat Duke, and I think they'll beat Virginia at the end. That puts them at 11-1. How do you close them out?
Yeah, so I've got them as a potential loss at Clemson, which would put them at 10-2 if that were the case. But I think whoever wins that game on November 9th is going to end up in the ACC title game.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think so also. So I guess let's just go to 50-50 games. So at Miami 50-50, at Syracuse 50-50, Clemson. I don't think any of the others are. That's only 3. So even if they lose all 3 50-50 games, that's 9-3, which the over-under was 8.5. So
correct.
I don't know. The Vatek over to me at plus 142 is, I don't know. To me, that's my favorite bet when it comes to win total.
Yep. My favorite as well. I'll tell you my least favorite for conference championship and win total, and that's Georgia Tech. That schedule is brutal. 11 of their 12 games are against bowl teams from last year.
Yeah, it is very tough, and that's why they're getting at 5.5. They're getting plus 136. So just to win half their games is plus 136. So that I do think they're better than people think, though. But this might not be the year, especially when you're starting the year in a different country, playing Florida State, who's going to be coming in just pissed off, ready to kill the world. So it's probably not the way you want to start the season either.
Yeah, and I think like if you look at their schedule, I mean, they've got Florida State, Miami, then they're at Louisville, they have at Virginia Tech, at Georgia, they're playing Notre Dame. I mean,
yeah,
they very well could perform above the 4.5 or whatever it is as far as the win total is concerned, but man, just ass kicking after ass kicking, man, that does a lot to your mental, and I think that can potentially stack up on them pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean that under. I mean, I know it's 168, so you'd have to lay a little bit, but yeah, I mean this schedule: Florida State, Georgia State. Georgia State's not a bad program. At Syracuse, VMI should be a win. That's the first true win I'm giving them. At Louisville, loss. Duke's probably a loss. At North Carolina, that's iffy. North Carolina's not going to be as good this year, but still probably a loss. Notre Dame, Vatek, Miami, NC State, Georgia. How do they get to 6? Like I don't even know if they can get to 3. Like that's going to be 3 might be their max, to be honest. So
I've got 3 to 4 wins. I've got them at roughly 3.5 right now.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, you have to lay a little bit minus 168, but I mean that seems almost like guaranteed money there. That'll be an interesting one to follow as the season goes. All right, so let's move on. We got some new head coaches in the conference. Our old rival, Manny Diaz. He used to be a coordinator at Florida State. Then he went to be the head coach at Miami. He recently was the defensive coordinator at Penn State, and now he's taken over for Mike Elko at Duke. Boston College, a little interesting. Bill O'Brien. He was New England's, the Patriots offensive coordinator. He was then hired by Ohio State. He stayed there for about 2 weeks. And then he took the head coaching job at Boston College. So he is there now in the ACC. Syracuse, we just talked about them a little bit. Head coach Fran Brown, he's coming over. He was the defensive backs coach at the University of Georgia. And like I said, for Syracuse, he did make some decent portal moves. The recruiting wasn't awful. So I think he's off to a good start at Syracuse. And Dino Babers had success at Syracuse. I think it was just, They just wanted to change. Like he never did too much, but he never was terrible either.
Yeah.
All right, Reese. Thoughts on the new 3 head coaches?
Yeah, I mean, just running down the list here, I think it'll be interesting to see what Manny Diaz does with Duke after Elko. He's proven he can be a great defensive coach, but the jury's still out on his head coaching duties after going 21-15 in 3 years with Miami prior to that DC role at Penn State. He brought with him 2 coaches from that stint in Miami to be his OC in DC, so hopefully they're able to learn from the speed bumps there, but big question mark as far as Manny Diaz and Duke goes. Bill O'Brien, huge hire for Boston College. I don't think O'Brien was as bad of an offensive coordinator as what a lot of Bama fans will say, and he clearly brings with him a tremendous amount of experience, which should serve Boston College well. They just don't have a lot of talent, so this is going to be a test for O'Brien to see if his system can make players play above their abilities, and that really starts with Castellanos. Really good dual threat QB, but he has to get passing percentage and interceptions under control there. Biggest question mark here for me is Fran Brown. He's been immediately impactful on the prep recruiting circuit and the transfer portal, which has given the program a boost, but he's never even been a coordinator, which is a little bit of an eye raise to go from a DB's coach to a head coaching position. But what's working for him is that the Orange has a pretty soft ass schedule. There's no glaring non-conference games. They avoid Florida State, Miami, and Clemson, so it should give them an opportunity to be plus 500 in year 1.
Yeah, I agree with that. And what, just to throw it out as the whole conference, what ACC coach would you say has the most pressure on him this year?
Yeah, that's hard for me to narrow down. I've got 3 that I noted here. First and foremost, I think Cristobal inherently is going to have a lot of pressure just due to bringing in the level of talent they did. If he can't make it work, I see him potentially getting the heave-ho. Tony Elliott at Virginia, they've obviously been through a lot as a program with the tragedy that happened there with the players getting murdered. And by all accounts, he's done a lot. He's gotten a lot of love from the fans and players on how he's led them kind of through the dark time there. But that said, football's football, and they only have 6 total wins in 2 seasons. They've gone 3-12 in the ACC, and that's not going to cut it. So, although I don't think Virginia as a program has extreme expectations, if he can get around 500, he's probably safe since he's just going into his 3rd year. But that's something to keep an eye out on. The guy with the most obvious hot seat, I think, is Pat Narduzzi. He's been at Pitt for 9 years. 21 and 22, they had great seasons, but the bottom fell out last year when they finished 3-9, 2-7 in conference play. 6 of those losses were double figure losses. The loss of Kenny Pickett may end up being the dagger that causes a change at the helm there at Pitt.
Yeah, and one thing I want to throw in, I like the 3 that you mentioned there, and Cristobal I think is the obvious one too, just because of the portal. But this one might be a little bit of a surprise, but I think we might have to start talking about Dabo a little bit. If he's not going to conform to what college football is becoming, and if they, again, don't go to a conference championship game, now, I guess it's not as important this year because there is still an outside shot that they might be able to make the playoff with the expanded playoff. So I guess we'll see what happens with that. But if he doesn't use the portal and he ends up not making the playoffs, like I don't know how long people are going to take that, because if he's just not going to be willing to adjust to how college football is adjusting, I think he's only going to slip. And Nick Saban even used that as one of his reasons for why he retired. He was like, the guys, it's not the same anymore. And Dabo seems to be one of those old school type guys that doesn't want to buy into the new way of how things are going to work, which is why I think I love Mike Norvell, because he is the complete opposite and he is nothing but adjusting. And I think that's why we're seeing the swing that we're seeing with Florida State as opposed to what Clemson. I think Clemson, I'm actually kind of worried about them this season because Cade Klubnik, the fans are already kind of turning on him. And everyone was like, oh, this guy's the next great thing. I don't know. I think that's going to be one of the better things to watch as the season goes on. All right. So talking about transfer classes, just some of the top 25 conference or portal classes for the conference. So Florida State came in at 7th. Miami came in at 10th. Louisville was 13th. Cal actually was 17th, which was a little bit of a surprise. NC State was 18th. And then, like we said, Syracuse was 25th with Fran Brown coming in, bringing in some decent transfers. And like I was just mentioning, Clemson was the only non-service academy FBS school that did not add a transfer. Like, to me, that's a big deal. And last year, if you remember from our portal episode, like every team had, it felt like 100, but every team had 1 million portal guys. We went through them all last year. We read every single one of them. Clemson brought in 1 player last year. So we're talking 1 player last year, 0 this year. Like, that's, I don't know. I'm not sure that's going to be the method to the madness that Forrest Gump there wants to run with. So, so some top transfers. The quarterbacks obviously are some of the bigger things we follow in college football. So here we go for the first time this year. Florida State quarterback DJ Uiagalelei. He brings it in. God, that name's going to get to me saying it this year. At Florida State, he started at Clemson. I hated this guy. He had to go. I forget who it was. Was it Deshaun? I think Deshaun maybe. No, it couldn't have been Deshaun. I don't remember what. Trevor Lawrence, I think it was. Trevor Lawrence was hurt at Notre Dame or suspended or had COVID. I think it was COVID. I think he had COVID. So DJ had to go in and start. It was his first college start ever. He actually put up huge numbers and had a great game. Looked like he was going to be just the next in line behind Deshaun and Trevor Lawrence at Clemson. Obviously, things kind of fell apart there. He ended up at Oregon State, had a decent year last year. And then the Pac-12 became the Pac-2, and everyone left. So DJ ends up as the quarterback at Florida State, following in the footsteps of Jordan Travis. I don't know. I'm still indifferent on DJ. He started at Clemson. He will always be a Clemson player in my mind, so that's hard to wrap my head around. But I like what he brings. I liked him in the spring game. I like the different style. His arm is big. Like I I think it's going to be great. I think he's a perfect fit for Norvell's offense. The guy that I talked about a lot that I actually wanted to come to Florida State, other than DJ, is Cam Ward. Of course, he entered his name in the NFL draft and pulled out, ended up back at Miami. He's had the last few years at Washington State. Some other names, NC State, Grayson McCall. He basically put Coastal Carolina on the map as their quarterback the last few years. He's going to be at NC State now. Sorry, it died. First one this year. Kyle McCord from Ohio State. He's going to be at Syracuse. Malik Murphy at Texas. He's transferring to Duke. Boise State, then Louisiana Tech quarterback Hank Bachmeyer's now at Wake Forest. Max Johnson, which he's had some big games. Max Johnson, he was at LSU, then Texas A&M. He's now the quarterback at North Carolina, following behind Drake May. And Tyler Shuck, he started at Oregon, went to Texas Tech, and now he is at Louisville, following behind. Jesus, I don't even remember Louisville's quarterback's name now. I lost it. He was the runner. I don't remember his name.
Yeah, I can't. He's escaping me as well.
All I can think of is Malik Murphy now because I just said his name. So what are your thoughts on the quarterback transfers?
Well, I mean, we talked about it a little bit. Was it Jack Plummer? Is that who we were?
Oh, Plummer.
Yeah, Plummer. We talked about it a little bit at the top of the show. Huge transfer portal incoming for ACC from the quarterback standpoint. With, I mean, what is that? 8 quarterbacks that are brand new out of 17. That's huge, and they're all decent players by their own right. I mean, obviously, there's varying degrees of good here, but excited to see what DJU is going to do in the Norvell offense. Also excited to see what Cam Ward is going to be able to do in Miami with Restrepo and some of the other guys they were able to bring in on the transfer portal. And Kyle McCord didn't have a bad career at Ohio State, and with him coming in with Brown and some of the other transfer guys they've come in, he could be a sneak pick for one of the better quarterbacks in the ACC. So looking forward to seeing how all these guys are going to be able to compete against each other.
Yeah, for sure. That's a lot of big college football names right there that are coming into the conference. So it's a nice change. Just some other notables that we have here. Louisville wide receiver Ja'Cory Brooks. He's coming over from Bama. Florida State got a huge one with defensive end Marvin Jones Jr. coming over from Georgia. Miami running back Damian Martinez from Oregon State. The horse team SMU offensive tackle Savion Byrd from Oklahoma. Boston College getting running back Trayshawn Ward, started at Florida State and Kansas State. And then North Carolina brought in actually Max Johnson's brother, Jake Johnson, the tight end, and he's going to be a big weapon for them. The Johnson to Johnson connection is going to be pretty deadly in Chapel Hill, I think. All right, so let's move on to just as a little bit of a season preview here, just some things that we like going on here. So the top 5 conference games this year. This is going to be our opinion of what 5 games we're looking for the most. So, Reese, what is your 5th ranked game? 5th ranked game.
5th ranked game here. Let's see. I've got Clemson at Virginia Tech on November 9th. This is a home game for Va Tech. It's their biggest home game of the season, so the Hokie faithful is going to be rowdy. Clemson will be hitting the road after a tough matchup against Louisville the previous week, and while Va Tech will be returning home after a trip to Syracuse, a lot's going to be at stake, but that is my number 5 game.
My number 5 game is Florida State, Georgia Tech in Dublin. Just to kick off the season, I'm ready for it. Week 1, see what both teams have. And it's, to me, there's not when your favorite team is the first game of the season, that's one thing you love. I got it with the Lions last year in the NFL, so it was awesome. I can't wait for August 24th for that. My 4th ranked game is Louisville versus Clemson on November 2nd. I just think that this one could potentially be something that goes a long way towards the conference championship. And if Clemson were to lose this, like we just talked about a little bit ago, we're talking dangerous territory that they might not even be potential playoff team.
Yeah, my 4th game I have is Miami at Louisville, October 19th. Great game between these two last year that clinched the ACC title game for the Cardinals. Miami's coming in with a better team this time around, and they'll be coming off a bye week while Louisville will be returning home after a game against Virginia. So that should be a fun one. That's my 4th game.
Go ahead. No, you're good.
I was just going to say my 3rd game. We touched briefly on this earlier, but Va Tech against Miami at Miami, September 27th. This matchup returns after a 1-year hiatus. They had played 30 years straight before the break last year. It's likely both of these teams are going to be coming into this game undefeated. And as you mentioned earlier, it's a solo Friday night game, so there should be a lot of fireworks in that one.
So my number 3 is one you've already mentioned. I've got Clemson versus Vatek on November 9th. Again, that's a huge one. That's the one that as we both said earlier, I think will go a long way to the conference championship game. My number 2 and 1 are probably obvious, just as homer picks. Number 2 is Clemson versus Florida State, October 5th, and number 1 is Florida State versus Miami on October 26th. Those are obviously the biggest games for me every year in the conference. So it'd be hard for me to pick something different than that.
Yeah, my number 2 game is the Noles traveling to Miami October 26th to face Cam Ward, the Hurricanes. I considered this being my top game just because I'm so excited to see these two transfer portal QBs battle it out. Miami only lost by a score last year. Again, like I said, Hurricanes have a better team coming in, so that'll be fun to watch. And then my number 1 is the October 5th game when Clemson travels to Tallahassee. Took overtime for the Noles to get that W in Death Valley last year. I'm sure Dabo is going to use that as motivation. If not for that scoop and score by Deloach at the end of the third quarter, the game may have turned out differently last year. So yep. I'm looking forward to that one. That's my number 1 ACC conference game.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be a fun year. Like Florida State, Louisville, Clemson, Vatek, I think are the 4 that we need to watch. Well, we'll say Miami too. We need to watch out for, but it's I just think, I don't know. I think we've got some better parity at the top of the conference. And for, like you had just mentioned, the Florida State Miami game with the transfer quarterbacks. If anyone wants to go watch a very good game, go watch Oregon State versus Washington State last year, as it was DJ Uiagalelei versus Cam Ward. That was a good game.
How did that game end up?
DJ won, like he will this year.
That was an alley-oop if you didn't realize that.
All right, so just some conference player of the year predictions here. We're going to give us offensive and defensive player of the year. Who do you have for your offensive and defensive player of the year?
I've got Cam Ward here, primarily because I think it's going to be such a change from what they've had the past couple of years, and they've got a pretty decent offense there. Speaking of Miami, a couple other names just to call out. Xavier Restrepo from Miami, I think, is a long shot. DJU, if he plays well, and especially if Florida State goes undefeated, that'll be hard to argue. And then one more name I have here, if he gets 1,000,000 yards, maybe Omarion Hampton at USC can make a case. Really strong running back. Don't see running backs winning player of the year that often, but if everything goes according to what North Carolina may look like, which is a heavier running team than they have in previous years, then he could potentially end up making a case for that.
So my offensive player of the year, I did go with the hope of Florida State being undefeated. So I went DJ Uiagalelei. I think you would have to give it to him if he's unless Lawrence Toafili just goes nuts. But I think DJ will be more the focal point. So I do have DJ. Defensively, I stayed with Florida State guys just because I think our defense is going to be really good, and both of these guys are potential first-round picks. I couldn't pick who I actually wanted, so I put 2 down here. Cornerback Oz Thomas, he's a first-round pick. He's the next Florida State cornerback to go to the NFL. He's an absolute stud. Also, defensive end Patrick Payton, again, following in the footsteps of the DNs from Florida State the last few years, behind Burns, behind Verse. That list could go on forever. But I think either Patrick Payton or Oz Thomas will be defensive player of the year.
Yeah, I've got Patrick Payton as my selection. A couple other guys that you didn't mention. Barrett Carter at Clemson is another guy to keep an eye on. And then defensive end at Louisville, Ashton Gillott, I think is how you say his last name. He's another guy that could be a long shot for defensive player of the year. But those are the guys that I have listed.
All right, so we're going to wrap up the conference preview here with a little conference championship game prediction. So, Reese, kick it off. Who do you have in the ACC conference championship game, and who wins that game?
Yeah, so we had some conversation. I know we're trying to create a little parody on the show here. We were aligned on what this game is going to look like, but just for the sake of parody, I went back and forth between Vatek and Clemson here. I'm going to go Clemson, Florida State in the ACC championship with no more divisions. This leads into a massive ACC championship game. There should be a lot of fireworks. I don't know if we're throwing predictions out, but I've got Florida State in a close one here, 31-28 on a late field goal.
I didn't pick a score, but God, could you imagine if if I got the joy of watching Florida State beat Clemson twice in one season, that would be absolutely incredible.
You're going to be insufferable.
There'd be nothing I'd love more than to see that. So my prediction, I actually have Florida State beating Va-Tech in the conference championship game. Like we said, Florida State, I think, is obvious. They're just continuing what they're doing, bringing guys back. DJ's obviously the story, how well he performs during the season. And Va-Tech, bringing back the number 1 offensive production, the number 12 defensive production. No team in the Power 5 is returning more starters. I just like Va-Tech. I like what Brent Pry is doing there. Kyron Jones at quarterback is a potential NFL pick. There's just a lot to like about Va-Tech, and what's to like the most is their schedule. They don't play a lot of these teams that are really good, so they're going to benefit. I think it's the Louisville story all over again. We mentioned it last year, like the middle of the season. It was like, you got to watch out for Louisville because their schedule sucks, and it worked. They made it to the conference championship game. I think we're looking at the same thing here. So I'm going Florida State over Va-Tech. Reese, anything to wrap up the ACC preview?
No, I mean, it's just there's going to be a lot of really, really good conference games in the ACC. I think the big question mark as we enter the season is this going to be the last big season for the ACC? Because Florida State, I don't think they're not hiding that they want out of the ACC, and I feel like if that happens, it's probably going to be a domino effect. So that'll be the interesting thing to see if this is the last great year for the ACC. If it happens to be the last great year, it's a hell of a last year to have because there are some really solid teams. Just continuing to keep an eye on how all these transfer portal guys are going to perform. Va-Tech is the team that I think I'm really the most excited to see how they're going to perform between their schedule and the guys that they're returning. Their improvement over the past couple of years, I think they could definitely be a dangerous team that might be a sleeper to come out of the ACC championship if Florida State somehow fumbles.
Yeah, I agree. All right. So that's going to wrap up our ACC conference preview. Like I said, we will be back with every other Power 4 now conference preview and give you guys a few more things before the season starts, maybe a gambling episode, more future bets and stuff like that. But just share the videos on all of our platforms, like them, subscribe to us, whatever you need to do. We will appreciate it. And that pretty much wraps it up. So for Reese Downing, I'm Jacob Workman, and that is it for the Tuesday Night Touchdown Podcast ACC Conference Preview.
Cheers, guys.